We're going to talk with an expert who covers the college football playoffs for ESPN, Heather Dinich, coming up literally in just a couple of seconds. But I think it's also time because if I asked Nick Saban this question tonight at his press conference, I'd get the same response as we did a couple of years ago, but we will be able to ask Heather. She'll respond to us much nicer than what Nick Saban did a couple of years ago when this question came up. Can Alabama lose and still be in? This was Nick Saban's response 2 years ago.
Well, that's certainly not the mindset that we want. I mean, this is a big game for us. It's an opportunity to win the SEC championship, which to me is a very, very significant accomplishment. And we hold that in very high esteem, having the ability to do that, having the opportunity to do it, having the ability to play for it, and to think that, you all put everything about the playoffs, man. That's all you care about. You don't care about any bowl games. You don't care about any teams in the country that aren't in the playoffs. I don't know if we don't win this game. Maybe we throw a stink bomb out there. Maybe we don't get in the playoffs. I don't know. You guys got all the answers to all that, but I don't. All right. All I know is if we play and we play well, we control our own destiny in terms of what we do. So I'd really rather not have any more questions about, is it okay to lose this game? It's never okay to lose a game.
Thank you, Nick. We just double-checked on you, but I'm sure that would be the same response that if we asked that same question today. But we will be able to ask that question to the college football playoff expert for ESPN, Heather Dinich. I hope you're having a great afternoon. Welcome back to T-Town.
Thanks. I'm not having no stink bombs for me today. Everything's all right here.
I love Nick Saban's rants. They just get me fired up, and it's so funny being in that room when he goes off on these little tangents. And even though that was a couple of years ago, it would still apply to a week like this, right?
Absolutely, but he makes a point. I'll tell you why. It's because the minute they lose a game, they're no longer separated from everybody else. All right, Alabama and Clemson and Notre Dame have separated themselves. And if Alabama should lose, there is not a guarantee that they get in. It depends on how they lose. But what happens then is they're lumped into the group of one-loss teams, right? And that separation goes away. And then it becomes a question mark for the selection committee. Is Alabama unequivocally, no doubt within that selection committee room, one of the 4 best teams in the country? Because if there's any doubt in that room, then they do need to apply the tiebreakers, one of which is a conference championship game. Now, it's not the end-all, be-all. It's part of the tiebreaker equation, but it is one of them, and then it opens the door for debate.
All right, so I know last night we were on a conference call with the chairman, and he wouldn't answer any hypothetical questions. Heather, can I throw a couple of hypothetical questions at you? Because I was watching. It's kind of fun to listen to all of us twist the verbiage and try to get him to answer, some type of hypothetical question. But let's say that Alabama goes over, and let's say it's 7 to 10 points. It's a close game, but somehow Georgia wins late. Maybe it's a touchdown. Do you feel like, just in your opinion, you know this, you've been covering this playoff thing. You feel like you're on the committee every year and you kind of understand the metrics that they use. Do you feel like that they would be in?
I feel like they would be in because not only did Rob Mullins say, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the selection committee chair was asked about Notre Dame possibly getting any consideration for the 1 or 2 spot. And Rob Mullins said that Alabama and Clemson have separated themselves. So the answer to that question was no. So that leads me to believe that right now they think Alabama and Clemson are head and shoulders above the rest, even Notre Dame, which is also undefeated, right? So I would think that if they lose a close game, they drop to number 4. But the other part of that is that Oklahoma and Ohio State both have shown weaknesses. And it would be very easy for them to justify, hey, they just lost to the number 4 team in the country. They've been our number 1 team all along. And meanwhile, you've got an Oklahoma defense that allows like 600 yards a game. And you've got an Ohio State team that has struggled far more than it has dominated. And to me, it would be easy for them to justify Alabama falling to the number 4 spot.
And not that they'll ever answer this question, but you look at Alabama last year. did they not put a stamp of approval on that committee's decision to put Alabama in by going on and winning it? I mean, was it a validation? Maybe you can trust a Nick Saban type team.
Yes. It's funny, though, because the selection, I interview every single selection committee member that is rotated off of the committee, right? And they will say, we got it right. Nobody feels like they made a wrong decision collectively in the past 4 years of the playoffs, but they also don't necessarily look at it as validation. But at the same time, I think that when you compare Alabama as a team, they've been better. They've looked better. And the committee sees it. It's not just as simple as Ohio State lost by 29 points to a 6-6 Purdue team. It's that they barely beat Nebraska. They won ugly against Michigan State. That quarterback against Maryland makes the throw on the 2-point conversion. We're not even having this discussion. So I think that there are a lot of other factors that go into it that would lean in Alabama's favor if they lose a close game.
All right, so let's say that Alabama wins and Clemson wins, Notre Dame wins. In your opinion, who deserves that number 4 spot? Just from the way that you judge it, the way that you see it between your eyes.
That's really tough. I tend to say Oklahoma because they have a historically good offense this year, and they've gotten in before with a suspect defense, even though by Oklahoma standards, this is a bad defense. And I just think that Ohio State put it together when it mattered most. It's the first time they played a complete game. I think it matters what they look like against Northwestern. I think it matters what both teams look like in their respective conference championship games. But I asked Rob Mullins on Tuesday night last night specifically about strength of schedule, and he said Oklahoma has a little bit better strength of schedule. Oklahoma's been ranked ahead of Ohio State every single ranking by the CFP to this point. So it seems like things are trending, obviously, in the Sooners' favor.
Let's go into another possibility. Let's say if Oklahoma's there at that number 4 spot, do you feel like that Alabama will get the call to go to Dallas, or do you think they'll push them to Miami?
I'm like 90% positive that they would go to Miami.
Okay.
Because the one thing that they don't want to do is put the number 1 seed at a geographic disadvantage. So if Alabama is playing Oklahoma, and only if they're playing Oklahoma, I think do they go to the Orange Bowl.
Well, and this is really crazy, but with Notre Dame standing still, is there any way they drop back a spot? I mean, do you see them staying right there at 3?
I think as long as Alabama and Clemson win, I think they stay there at 3 because I don't see Oklahoma or Ohio State jumping above them. And I think, Clemson would have to look pretty bad, I think, to fall below them.
Sure.
But anything's possible.
Well, and maybe I'm just looking at it from a money standpoint. I mean, think about what an Alabama-Notre Dame semifinal would look like. I mean that would be epic, but I guess you could make the case for Alabama, Oklahoma. Alabama gets Ohio State. I mean, the blue bloods of college football.
Right. Yeah. I don't think you can go wrong with any one of those teams as far as matchups. And I think a lot of people actually would really want to see what Alabama's offense and Oklahoma's offense look like against each other and what that game would actually be like. Because, there was a sense like, well, Michigan's defense is so good, can they stop Tua? And then it's like, well, maybe Oklahoma's actually the team that can hang with Tua.
Sure. Well, and now here in Tuscaloosa with all of us, because you're shaped by the environment that you're in, and we've watched Nick Saban defense. We look at it and go, "Are you kidding me?" I mean, I'd like to see Nick Saban's head explode with having that defense and the mistakes and the missed tackles. I mean, I'd love to be in a press conference following his team performing like Oklahoma's defensive side of the football. I mean, he'd go in a panic attack on the sidelines.
Right. Well, I mean, you look at what happened with LSU and A&M. I mean,
oh yeah, sure.
Those guys in overtime almost played enough snaps for an entire game. But the difference is, and we kind of talked about this on Sunday a little bit at ESPN, the difference is that happened one time. Like those kinds of yards happen every week in the Big 12. And I feel like that's a whole different philosophical football discussion.
All right. Let me ask the question with Central Florida. Do you see a scenario where they could slip in the back door and become part of the conversation?
I really don't.
Okay.
And that's because their strength of schedule is just it's so brutal that they're behind 2-loss Michigan right now. And I understand that the injury, very devastating to quarterback Mackenzie Milton, changes things for them, changes their identity and, their team chemistry, everything. I don't know if they're going to beat Memphis. They barely beat Memphis with him in the lineup. But that being said, if Northwestern wins the Big Ten, if Texas beats Oklahoma, if Alabama wins, I think in that scenario they would actually take a 2-loss Georgia over undefeated UCF.
Okay, and that was kind of my next question, is looking at a Georgia loss, maybe it's a close loss. Could you see them holding on to that number 4 spot? I mean, let's say this game is a fourth quarter game. It goes down to the final few minutes. I mean, can Georgia hang on and get 2 SEC teams in the conversation, even with a win? When we talk about Ohio State winning, Oklahoma winning, do you see Georgia's 2-loss still hanging on? Can they hang on?
No, I don't see that happening unless there's upsets in the Big 12 and Big 10 championship game. Because, I mean, we all saw how hard it was for the possibility of a 2-loss champ to get in. When we saw what happened with Auburn last year, right? And, I mean, it's hard to get in as a 2-loss team winning your conference. And obviously they didn't, but let alone not winning is what I'm trying to say. It's one thing to try to be in the race as a 2-loss conference champion. I feel like it's a totally different discussion if you're a 2-loss runner-up, unless everything else, there's, the snowball's chance.
College football playoff expert from ESPN.com, Heather Dinich, final question. How much talk is there, because we hear it on talk radio, and I know we generate it from time to time during the offseason, how much talk is there to move beyond 4 teams with the people that really matter, not me and all of us talk radio guys throwing it out as conversation pieces, but how much is in that room and in that discussion, maybe not in the committee room, but from the presidents and the ADs of getting past 4 teams, maybe to 6, maybe to 8? Do you see it anytime in our future here?
I think eventually at some point it's inevitable because that's the way life is, right? But at the same time, people have to remember that we are in the 5th year of a 12-year contract. And the 10 FBS commissioners and Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick are the ones with essentially the power to change that. But you've also got to remember you've got university presidents involved in this as well who oversee the whole thing. So you take all of those people, I call them the suits of the sport, and they're the ones who would have to change their mind. And you have to remember how long it took to get them to this point. And I also think that in the end, this year in particular is a perfect example of why they did not want automatic qualifiers, why they did not want to say, okay, you won your conference championship, you're in. Because in the Pac-12, you're looking at a 3-loss champ. You could be looking at a 4-loss champ if Northwestern wins, 3-loss champ if Texas wins. So you get all these upsets, and then all of a sudden you're looking at your playoff, and it's like, whoa, are these really the best teams? So I think there will be conversations at some point eventually on it, but I just don't think that those people in the positions of power are quite there yet.
Heather, do you take your sleeping bag and sleep outside the door? I mean, what exactly is – because, I just have this image because I've never been there in the college football playoff headquarters as you're just sitting there on that door and with other reporters with your ear up to the door trying to get any type of little tip as they go into this big discussion as who gets that 4th spot if everything goes chalk.
So they're at the Gaylord Hotel in Grapevine, Texas, and they're in this meeting room. And I stand right outside the elevator, and I wait for them to go on and off the elevator. Sometimes I go down to the gym, and I see some of them in there early in the morning and chit-chat with them a little bit. They let me into the room very briefly. I say hello to everybody. I love championship weekend because it's the only time all season they're in there watching games together. Usually they come in and meet Sundays, Mondays, and fly out Tuesday. But this weekend, some of them stay because they had to meet this week for Tuesday's ranking. Some of them stay right through the whole thing because it's just easier. And it's fun because they actually get to watch these games together. So it's a little bit of a different take. But, yes, I'm camped out until I get kicked out.
There you go. College football playoff expert for ESPN.com, CFB Heather on the Twitter account. Heather Dinich, as always, thank you again for your time, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much. You too.